My name is Eric Lucrezia. I'm from ESSEC Business School in Paris, France. I've been in the news a lot lately, but things are fortunately going a lot better over here so far. And well, this is about the time of year when those who are applying for MBA programs are really cracking down and getting to work on their essays. And why essays are so important? Well, I can't speak for every business school, but at least here at ESSEC, and it seems to be the case for most MBA programs, that as part of the application process, there are essays that are included. They'll have a varying degree of word counts and a varying number of essays. But it's usually part of the process where you're evaluated to be either shortlisted or not to get the interview. So obviously, it's a very important step in getting the interview, which for me is actually the most important part of the process in terms of getting admitted into the MBA program, because the interview is where you really get to shine, you really get to show who you are, your professional side, how well you present yourself, you think on your feet, etc. But to get there, you need to have those great essays, of course, in conjunction with your GMAT score and other factors as well. So let's get started. Again, this topic is writing a winning essay, which is the key to getting shortlisted for an MBA program interview. Theoretically, I'll be able to turn the page. There we go. Okay, so this may seem super obvious, but be sure to answer the question. So in an MBA application, it may be free writing form, and if that's the case, it's really open, which can even be scarier. But if there are specific questions, be sure to answer the question. I know what I've seen sometimes. I think people get maybe nervous or just distracted or lost in their own creative brilliance and sort of miss the point. So be sure to stay focused, even though you may have certain anecdotes that are, let's say, highlighting the points that you like to make. Make sure it ties back to the original question. And I think it's also good to make reference of what you already know about the program, just to show that you've done your research, but keeping it all in a nice neat package. That's the way to express that you know how to express. Sorry, the way to show that you know how to express your ideas without getting lost in thought, as I probably just did right now. So number 2, respecting the word count. Well, it's really straightforward, but again, it's a small detail, but some schools may or may not be strict about this. It's also important to know, is it a maximum? Like if it says 400 words, is it a max 400? Is it a minimum 400? Or is it an average? And if it's not clear, don't be afraid to ask. That's what the school reps or the admissions counselors or the recruitment officers are there for. As you see, the titles vary. So, word count. Okay. Make sure your English is perfect. Now, this applies to native English speakers as well. Sometimes this can go awry when you start writing the way you speak. So, of course, writing in a more formal written English is the way to go. If you're not a native English speaker, don't be afraid to enlist some of your friends or colleagues who are. This, of course, can be a paid service. Depending on where you are in the world, it may be more difficult to find a native English speaker. But don't just depend on the spell check of the computer. Computers make mistakes as well. So, of course, you're going to spell check like several times all your essays for grammar and spelling, but also have a real human being that can check to make sure it's properly said. I think it's also a good idea to have somebody who works in the industry, who works either in business in general or who has done an MBA or who works in your field of business, to have a look at it too. And while I'm thinking about it, another point to make is refrain from using too many industry terms that are technical and complicated that might be confusing to somebody who's not from your line of work. So, perfect English. All right, so this sort of connects to the next point here, considering the reader. So think about who's going to be reading your essays. Are they going to connect with what you're saying? Is it going to flow easy enough? As I say here, the first impressions are lasting. It's the first time that for many of the admissions people, this is the first time that they're making contact with you, the first time they're hearing from you, and you want to make a good impression. So another point, I say lose the local lingo. That is to say, try to speak in a more, write in a more formal English. I know this can vary from certain cultures, but it's something to be avoided if you can. And as I said earlier, just avoid using too many technical terms that would sort of distract the reader from the point you're trying to make. I mean, sometimes in trying to illustrate your idea in an essay, you may be giving an example of something you've accomplished or achieved in your workplace. And as you start thinking about it, you start giving these details, and it can be excessive. It can take away from your main point. There may be too many technical terms that just gets the reader lost and frustrated, and feelings of frustration are not what you want when you have somebody reading your essay for admission into an MBA program. So I think that's a good point to remember. Yes. Do you know what you want and have a plan to get there? I think one of the most important things is to be able to articulate that you have a plan for yourself, that you have goals in the short, medium, and long term. And generally, probably the essay questions are being asked to ascertain that information. But if it's not explicitly like that, you can still use those essays, especially if there's a free form essay, to articulate those goals. So that being said, make sure that your message is clear, it's not confusing, and also that your goals match what the program has to offer. The reader is probably somebody from the admissions team, or maybe even from the career office, who has a say on your intake into the program. They want to make sure they can deliver on what you need or what you're hoping to get out of the program. So it's very important as part of your research to understand what the program is about, that the details of the program and the career services and network that lie for you ahead match what you're looking for. Because if they're not able to deliver what you're looking for, that's going to be a problem for everyone. So think about the goals. So this again nicely brought me to my next point about articulating your goals maturely. So this is about what you see in bold and underlined at the bottom there, being specific and realistic. I tell people when I meet prospective students at fairs all the time, if you remember nothing else, these two words, specific and realistic. That being said, you should be able to articulate your short, medium, and long-term goals and what you hope to get out of the program and after the program in a clear way, in a concrete way. It doesn't mean that you know everything that's ahead for you. It doesn't mean that you can't change. I think it's also important to keep in the back of your mind that when you do the MBA program, you're going to meet all sorts of people from all over the world, from different cultures, from different sectors of business. You're going to be exposed to new ideas in the classes. You're going to make contacts either through their alumni networks or during corporate visits that are just going to open your mind to new ideas. So you may end up even completely changing what you do during the MBA program. And that might seem a bit scary, but that's good. That means it's working. That means you're getting something out of the program. So when I say be specific, you have to approach the application process with specific, concrete goals in mind and state those in your essay. But at the same time, knowing in the back of your mind that that could totally change throughout the course of the program, and that's fine. The other side of that specific coin is being realistic, and that is to say not biting off more than you can chew. Look, an MBA program can do wonders for your career. It's really an amazing catalyst that can just, shoot you up to the next level, increase your salary, increase your level in business. But it's not a magic stick. You have to be realistic. And if you do have a lot of changes in mind, if you're looking to change sector of business, to change your function, to change country, this is something called triple transformation. Trying to do all of that in one step, in one shot, is just completely unrealistic. I think anybody from Harvard to Hong Kong would tell you the same thing, and that is trying to do too many things at the same time is unrealistic. And as much as we don't like to admit it, I think the business world is a little bit more conservative than we like to think about. So there's a question of trust. Somebody, just because they graduate with an MBA, does not mean that they suddenly know how to do a job they never have done before in a foreign country, in a culture or language that they've never spoken or lived in before. So that's the side of being realistic. I'm not trying to shoot down dreams. What I'm just saying is if you have a lot of changes in mind for yourself, spread them out. Understand how to articulate these goals for yourself in a way that's more realistic. So maybe you have one change in mind for immediately after the completion of your MBA program. And then 3 to 5 years down the road, you want to jump into the next phase, so the second change, and then maybe 4 or 5 years after that, the third one. So it's just a process. And I think it's unrealistic to expect a magical transformation that is complete 360 or 180 or however you'd like to say it, just after 1 or 2 years of having studied. It does not mean that you have the know-how of on-site. So again, specific yet realistic. Okay, demonstrate teamwork and leadership. I think what people are looking for is to see that you know how to work as a group. It's sort of that balance between individual work, so that's autonomy and accountability and self-reliance, and at the same time knowing how to work in a team dynamic. If you haven't done a lot of team-based work in your current or previous jobs, it can even come from outside of work. Sports experiences definitely catch the attention of people. So if you're playing on any team sports like soccer, basketball, hockey, etc., that sort of gives the impression that you understand teamwork, and I think it's an obvious connection. So don't be afraid to talk about that. Also, leadership can come in many forms. Again, program to program, it will vary. Some programs require that you've managed people, teams of people beforehand, especially at the executive level, whereas other programs no. So you have to find the program that works for you. But in the case of ESSEC, anyway, leadership can come in many forms. It may be that you've managed already teams of people, or it could be that you've directed certain projects, you've been a chair of certain committees, just some form of leadership. And it could also, again, be outside of the workplace. Perhaps you're very much involved in an association or a community service type of organization that is where you have a leadership role as well. So we'd like to hear about that. What we really don't want is like a cookie cutter kind of student where, what we seek is diversity. So we don't want everyone to have the same managerial experience coming into the program. But these are things that you should definitely highlight and talk about in your essays. Teamwork and leadership will speak volumes in terms of your caliber. Okay, so well, this is obvious. It's about diversity. I think by now, pretty much everywhere in the world, diversity is something that's quite valued. And so talk about it. Show your colors. Any experiences that you have, whether it's that you've changed countries, as a child or adolescent, you've moved abroad, if you've studied abroad during high school or university, if you've already worked in a foreign country, if on a daily basis through the course of your job you are interacting with companies in different countries, maybe B2B interactions, or your clients are abroad. So many, many aspects to internationalism, and highlight that whenever you can. I think what the most important thing about that is it shows that you have experience already working with different cultures, languages, perhaps even currencies, and it shows a higher level of cultural sensitivity and understanding and flexibility that you'll be much more easily able to adapt arriving to that business school and surviving that year or two, living in a foreign country perhaps, and working with people from all different countries and getting by. And then afterwards, because it's always about afterwards, an MBA is a relatively short period in your life where you're spending a year or 2 years really focused, concentrating on working on you and your career path, and it's all about what's afterwards. So we want to know before you even get there for the interview, and that's via your essays, that you have what it takes not just to make it through the program, but to succeed afterwards. That's what it's all about. And let's be honest, every business school wants great people who they can attach their label to and see them succeed, and you make us look good because we've made you look good. So it's a mutual thing here. So anyway, getting back to the point of this slide is just showing your any sort of diversity will be to your advantage. So about telling a good story. Well, think about how many essays that we have to read. The admissions team has a huge job ahead of them, depending on the number of essays that they ask for. So try to keep it interesting. If you can engage your audience, engage your reader, be that essay that that ends up getting talked about. Oh, did you read this one? Or look what I heard about. So think about how you can be creative. This might be a challenge for some of you. Sorry about that pop-up window. This may be a challenge for some of you to how to find that right balance between being creative and interesting while remaining professional. And that's where I think your friends and colleagues come into play. They'll give you the kind of feedback that'll sort of tell you if you're going in the right direction. Sometimes you write something and it sounds good to you, and then to other people it may come off the wrong way. So I think running it by your friends and colleagues will really help you find the right balance there. As I say at the end, always remain professional. But if there's something you can tell, some kind of experience that happened at work or outside of work in any way that relates to the question, but highlights you and your personality, talk about it. Make it interesting. And the last, so some bonus tips about the CV. So just like to preface that a couple of years ago, for 2 years, I was doing workshops on how to do your CV or resume, depending on where you're from, in English, and how to interview in English. It was working at another school here in Paris. And I've come to learn a lot of things about CVs. They're really personal documents, and it'll vary so much culturally, especially. But I think there's 3 main factors that will determine how your CV will come out and how it should come out. And those 3 things are: 1, you and your personality; 2, the sector of business that you're applying for. So, what type of job are you applying to be? A teacher, an actor, a lawyer, a doctor. It's gonna vary vastly based on the business, on the career fields. And finally, where? What country in the world? There's certain sort of rules or norms that are in place for CVs that are pretty standard. Do you include a picture or not? Do you put your marital status or not? The fact that you have a driver's license is normal to put on a CV in some countries, totally not in others. In some cultures, in some countries, it's totally not typical or possibly even legal to put things such as your marital status or even your age. So it's important to know that. And as a general rule, this might sound a little bit excessive, but I think it's really useful. If you're applying for a job or a school or an internship in a foreign country, the best thing you can do for yourself is to download examples. I mean, you have the internet at your disposal. What I would do is download as many as 20 or so examples of CVs that fit your category, and you'll start to see a pattern. You'll start to see what's normal in this place. And it takes a little bit of time. I'll give you an example. I was tutoring a student in English who was in medical school, pharmaceutical school actually. She was applying for an internship in Sweden in pharmacy. So, okay, it was in English, but in the country of Sweden, and it was pharmacy internship. So we just Googled that, CV, pharmacy, Sweden. And lo and behold, lots of examples came up. And so we downloaded many, and then we started to see that there was a pattern, because it's impossible to know every combination in the world, So keep that in mind. It's very local, and it's very much about the career field that you're applying for. Now, thinking about MBAs specifically, there seems to be a consensus that 1 page is the MBA traditional format. Sometimes 2, but that can vary from school to school. I've heard presenters from some top schools in the U.S. talking about, hey, 1 page is it. And people doing an MBA are usually in the range of like 25, 26 to 34, 35 usually. And the guy who was presenting was saying, he's like, look, I'm 50-something years old. If I can get my whole professional life on a one piece of paper, so can you. So that was the idea. I know for certain countries, 6, 7 or more pages is standard, and if you don't have that many pages on your CV, that means you haven't done enough. So that's, again, start thinking outside of your own culture, comfort zone, if you will, and think about where you're applying. Where is the school for which you're applying? So that will, I think, impact the way you organize your CV. So what I have here, I mean, you can read, obviously, it's very local, as I said, but respect the format given by the institution. The standard seems to be 1 to 2 pages, no more. I think it's very important that your contact information be right at the top and easy to find. Sometimes I get CVs where I have to search around to find the email address or the phone number or the name even, and it's annoying. And you don't want to be the person who has the CV that's annoying to read because you're already in the negative. You're already starting from negative zero, negative. Um, yeah, the standard seems to be in reverse chronological order for most countries that I've seen CVs coming from. Work experience, if we're talking about MBAs, work experience first. That's what we want to see. Where have you worked before? And then your education, and then the rest. Okay, stuff before university level. In certain cultures, it's totally normal to include things as young as high school or even elementary school. For me, as an American, I've never seen that in the US, but I know it's normal in some countries. Definitely when you're applying for an MBA, and I think it's safe to say no matter where in the world you're applying for an MBA, you can cut out anything that happened before university level. It's just irrelevant, and it takes up space, and it just adds to the clutter. I think it's part of it in being a manager is knowing how to, again, express yourself efficiently and concisely. So extra stuff is a waste of time and effort by everyone. As far as the photo, this is a personal choice. Again, I would consider the country in which the business school is that you're applying to. But a photo, if you do include it, should be of a professional nature, not just some picture from Facebook and you sort of crop out your friend with the arm around you. I've seen it, believe me. But having a photo that is professionally taken, spend the money, I don't know, 30, 40 bucks, have some nice pictures taken, and you can include something like that. Not too large. It's not a headshot. You're not going for a modeling job. This is an MBA, so think that way. And then PDF it, of course. Okay, so after you've spent all this time and effort formatting your CV, half the time when it gets sent, and it's just a Word document, for example, it gets warped and it gets all jumbled up. So to avoid that, PDF it. That also guarantees that the content isn't going to get modified somehow. What you've written will be received that way, period. Always PDF. And by the way, when you're contacting somebody, some school rep, admissions counselor, or recruitment officer about an MBA, include the CV from the first contact, because the first thing they're going to ask you for, or at least in their mind, they're going to be thinking, I need to see this guy's CV. So save them the trouble of asking. If you're going to contact somebody asking about a program, show the courtesy of supplying your CV, your updated CV, by the way, right from the beginning. It shows that you're serious, that you're interested, that you're ready to share about yourself, because that's what it's about. It's about finding the right match for the program. So these are my tips about CVs in complement to my tips about essays, and that's pretty much everything I have to say on the subject. So I hope this was helpful. I hope that at this time, if you're working on your essays, this has taken off some of the stress, and I try to be a little bit fun about it. So if you have any questions, I'm willing to take them right now. You can just type it in your window, and I'll answer them as best as possible. Meanwhile, you have my email here, and if later you think of additional questions you'd like to ask, feel free to jot it down and get in touch whenever. Well, Dan, I don't see any questions here, so maybe you want to wrap it up.
Eric, actually, there is one question. What is your biggest failure? How should that question be handled in a if that's one of the essay questions? How would you recommend? It's a tricky question. You're being asked to kind of explain what is your biggest failure, maybe what you learned from it. Can you give any insight on how you might advise somebody to answer that question?
Sure. So if I understand you correctly, you're asking how does one deal with the question, what is your biggest failure? Yes?
Correct.
Yeah. So I would say, first of all, just be honest. Okay, you're not there to tell some horribly embarrassing story. So of course, keep it professional. That's always the rule of thumb. But be honest about it. I think everyone knows. I think everyone's in agreement that we all have failed at some point in life, and failures are nothing to be afraid of or embarrassed about. It's something to learn from. And if you can take that failure and recognize what didn't work, learn from it, grow from it, and become a bigger, stronger, better person, more professional person from it. That's all to your credit. So there's nothing to be afraid of about failing. It's normal, and anyone who has not failed is lying. I can see there's questions, but Dan, it's really hard to read them. There's a tiny window.
Eric, if you click on the upper right corner of the questions module, it should pop out and take up more space and hopefully be more easy to read. But if you click on the individual questions, you should see them in their entirety.
Yeah, much better. Thanks. Okay. So, I can't hear any words. Somebody asks, should you be extremely honest? I mean, yes, I said it a minute ago, but I'll say it again. I think being honest is key because it's not just about getting into the best program, it's getting into the program that's the right program for you. And by the way, what our impressions of as best program can be not exactly accurate anyway. I think you should be honest as much as possible, but always remain professional. So you say extremely honest. What is extremely honest? I mean, I'm sure there's some things you don't necessarily want to tell your grandmother or the person who you're applying, the admissions counselor you're talking to for your MBA program. So, keeping in mind that. But yeah, of course, be honest. So Purnima from India asks how to handle the question, please provide additional information or insights. So I think when business schools do this, this is sort of carte blanche, or it's sort of a free moment for you to express any additional points that you think would help your candidature. So it's not required. If you think that you've managed to capture everything you want to say in the main essay questions and there's nothing else, then you can skip it. But if you feel there's more, I think what you can do in this sort of free writing section, is address any points that you think might be perceived as a problem. For example, a lapse in your employment. That's usually the big one that people are afraid of, like, oh, I'm not working right now, or 2 years ago I didn't work for a year or two. Well, this is a great chance to talk about it and explain that before they say, what was that, and maybe not shortlist you. So address the issue, address any potential concerns before they become real concerns. Another one could be if you've changed jobs many times in short periods of time, like every year you have a new job, that could raise red flags. So address that. Maybe the reason that you weren't working, by the way, is because you were working on starting a business, or you were starting a family, or there was a sickness, on your part or the part of someone close to you you have to take care of. So it could be part of the whole, this is a challenge I faced and this is how I dealt with it kind of thing. So I think that's a great thing if you have that option to provide additional information. All right, so here's another question. I'm going to read the question. Sergio saying, how can you include your international heritage and experiences without dragging it out and sounding cocky? I'm from Sweden with South American parents applying to an American university. I'm not sure why it would sound cocky. I mean, I suppose it's the way you write it, but I mean, speaking about your international heritage, I think is just a positive thing. You just speak about it plainly. It's not nothing you need to brag about. I think you talk about it in a more matter-of-fact way. Don't say, by the way, I'm Swedish. Like, you start describing an experience that it's inherent that you're Swedish in what you're saying, for example. I hope I answered the question. You can add more question if you can restate it if I didn't answer it properly. Anna asks if I can email the presentation to her. Sure, unless Dan has some means to do that, to send it to everyone at once. Sure, I'm happy to email to you.
We'll be posting the presentation on the Beat the GMAT website following today, so it will be available for everybody if anybody's missed the front end, or if I think a couple of you had some audio difficulties. We'll be posting that on the website this week.
Great, thanks, Dan. Okay, so the next question is there an MBA standard for the length of essays? No. The school will state it. Usually they say a word count. Again, I said this in the beginning in case you missed it. If they say the word count, sometimes it's not clear. Is that the minimum, the maximum, or an average? So if it's not clear, don't hesitate to ask. And if there's no indication, then I would still ask. So here's a question from Maximiliano from Argentina. Regarding the CV, should I specify the function that I performed, or should I focus only on the leadership roles listed and give monetary measures of my impact on both? What level of detail is best? So again, I would focus on like the whole picture here. You want to be able to summarize your professional life, if possible, in one page, if not maximum 2 pages. So if the details that you're talking about, like monetary impact and leadership roles and all the things that you mentioned, are going to take up so much space, you're going into 3 or 4 pages, then no, cut that detail. But I think the function is really one of the key things here. That's how we know what you did. The name of the company, the dates you were there, the location, so that is to say the country and probably the city, and the function that you had. If you're going to give additional detail beyond that, uh, things that are concrete, like impact that you had, I think is quite nice, especially if there's hard data, like, I don't know, let's say a 20% increase in sales over the course of 3 years or whatever. Something like that shows actual added value that you contributed to. So you could include that if it fits. Pranima asks about how to best answer questions focusing on weakness. I think I sort of said this already with the failure question. It's pretty much the same thing. Be honest about it and show how. I mean, the first thing about about improving oneself is to recognize their own weaknesses or failures. So acknowledging it, saying, showing through your words that you see how something failed or how you were or are weak at something and how you intend to improve upon that. It's all about, again, we're all human. We're all human, and we make mistakes, and there are opportunities to learn. So I think it's nothing to be afraid of. Should that be incorporated or avoided? I'm trying to understand these questions here. How should we start developing the essay, and is there a specific order? For example, should we should refer first to our goals and our work experiences? Well, Angela, it's hard to answer that question. I mean, is there a specific question they're asking you, or is it just open forum essay? I don't know how to answer this question. I think it should be oriented around your work first, because that's what you're doing currently. So it's like the present, and then getting into your goals after makes more sense to me. Projecting into the future. That's how I would go about it. Yeah. So first about work experience and then goals. How much experience is appropriate for admission? I mean, this will be defined by each university individually, but generally a full-time MBA program, in the case of ESSEC, we call it the Global MBA. It's for people with a minimum of 3 or 4 years experience, and beyond 10, let's say, we usually direct them to our executive MBA program. So you'll see generally around the world, executive MBAs are for people with 10 or 15 or even a little bit more years experience. And we're talking about full-time postgraduate experience. Sometimes people say, oh yeah, I have 4 years experience, but it started back when they were in high school. No, that doesn't count. When we talk about years of professional experience, that's from when you graduated university or business school and started working full-time. So Anna asks, I want to become an entrepreneur. How to define my short-term and long-term goal? Well, I don't know if you've developed your idea, if you have a business plan for a specific startup that you like to launch, but I would talk about that. I don't know, I think the question is a little bit specific, that maybe, Anna, you can feel free to contact me at my email address and we can talk about your entrepreneur case a little bit more in detail. So Vural asks, what should I outline more in my essays if I have my own business opened 8 years ago and I worked only from home, managing teams only online? Well, I think that this situation is interesting. I mean, you've worked largely independently. I mean, working with people, but from your own home, and online, so at distance. So I think what's interesting to understand about you is how you dealt with the challenges of working in a digital capacity, working without actually being face to face with people, the challenges of communicating ideas and motivating people. It seems like you had quite a number of people working for you the way you describe it. So that's interesting to know how you achieve that, and that would make for interesting content for your essay. Nathan asks, what are some mistakes that applicants make that ensures their application does not get shortlisted? I think it would pretty much be the opposite of everything I said today. I mean, this presentation is based on the mistakes that I've seen. So let's say first, not answering the question, not respecting the word count, telling stories that are confusing and unrelated to an MBA. Perhaps one of the key deterrents for the admissions team when they read essays is when people appear to not know what they want in their professional path and don't know what ESSEC is about. If they seem to be discussing things that are unrelated to, I mean, this is pretty rare. I mean, honestly, most of the essays that I read do not go this way, but it can happen that you say this person is totally lost. Or what can be a red flag, as I said, realistic, specific yet realistic. So people who are unrealistic with their goals, I mean, again, I'm not here to crap on anyone's dreams, but if you have a lot of changes in mind for yourself, understanding that you have to space these things out over time. You cannot transform everything overnight. And when I say overnight, I mean just after an MBA program. So there's a timing to consider. So people who have unrealistic expectations for themselves and for an MBA school as being some kind of magical stick, that's a red flag for somebody who's going to ultimately be a problem for their program because they're never going to be happy. So again, that's why I say consider the reader. Consider, what message you're conveying, and are you understandable? Are you clear? And are you being realistic? Hope that helps, Nathan. So Isha asks, I have completed my graduation in June 2014, and I'm helping my father in his business. So my work experience will it count or not? You graduated in 2014, so that was about 6 months ago. So you need generally for a full-time MBA program at least 3 or 4 years professional experience after graduation. So you clearly don't have that. If your work is working with your father, if it's a family business, that surely can count if there's 3 or 4 years of that. So I think that's pretty clear. Next from Ray, I had consulting business for 12 years. Now I have joined a global company. I'm planning on going back to my own business. Is it a good idea to be with global company for executive MBA? Huh. Honestly, Ray, I don't know. I don't work for an executive MBA program, and I don't know what they would have to say about that. I don't want to misdirect you, so what I can do is put you in touch with my colleague any one of my colleagues who work on the executive MBA, and they could give you a much clearer answer for that. Unfortunately, I don't want to misdirect you, so I'm not going to answer that. Nimesh asks how to compensate for average academic performance during undergraduate studies in the essays. Okay, well, just like anything that you perceive as a fault or a potential cause for concern, address it. However, I think a lot of schools, MBA programs, are not really concerned about the actual marks you got on, during the courses. As far as I've seen, it's more about the work experience. This is MBA programs. You need to understand they are not academic-centered programs. Of course, you're taking classes. Of course, you're going to learn things. Of course, hopefully, there's some great gems of information and wisdom, and you're inspired in these classes. But it's not about that. It's all about the careers. It's all about your job experience before, your leadership, your ability to work as a team, and network and shine. And so, and it's certainly about that for after the MBA. So, that's going to vary from school to school if they check into your grades very much. But again, if you're hearing from a particular school that this is very important, then address it. You cannot hide things. You cannot lie, number one. And so it's all right there on your CV. Of course, in your CV, you're going to highlight the best things as much as possible and avoid getting into things that you perceive as a negative. But, for all intents and purposes, your professional life is on that piece of paper in front of them. And so the essays will not only show your ability to express yourself, but your writing style and your level of, let's say, attention to detail. But, it's your chance to complement what you have on that CV with supporting information in a prose format that shows what you really are. So use it to your advantage. The essays are really like a gift in a way to sort of, I guess, compensate for anything that you feel is a concern. Ray says, I work in diverse global companies and diverse teams from all over the world. And that's it. Well, very good, Ray. Thank you. Maximiliano, again, says, I have entrepreneurship goal too. I have a business plan and developing a startup here in Argentina. My short term is to launch a business during BS. Okay, well, it's story time apparently. Viswadeep, you're asking about GPA. You're asking a very specific question that's obviously going to vary from school to school. Will the GPA be calculated on the basis of theory subjects? I mean, you're going to have to check with each school on that. Okay, Viral asks an interesting question. I'm not sure if you're a man or a woman, so I'll just say. Viral says, you mentioned in your presentation many times that the most important fact about an MBA is that you need to make sure if it's a fit for you. What are the best tips to try to find out if the MBA program is the best fit for me? So obviously, the first thing that's available to all of us is right on the web is the website. So know the website inside and out. Like, it's your job to understand the university through and through and get as much information as possible as you can from the website. Second, talk to the recruitment managers. So in the case of ESSEC, I'm your man. You have my email right on the screen. You get in touch with me and you say you'd like to arrange a chat. We can have a Skype call. I'm happy to call you by phone wherever you are in the world, and we'll have a chat and get to know if what the school has to offer, what the MBA program in question has to offer is matching your goals. Think about the structure of the program. Think about where you go. Are there trips involved? In the case of ESSEC, we spend 5 weeks on our campus in Singapore getting to know Asian business models. We do a 1-week field experience in an emerging country. So for those focusing on emerging markets, that's quite interesting. We have a mentor program. If you're someone who's seeking guidance from somebody who's a professional already in your specific field, it's a real plus. Everyone really likes this. Everyone gets their own mentor in our program. There's constant company visits. We have people coming to campus from various companies to do special presentations, but we're many times going on site to visit companies around here in Paris region. We visit Louis Vuitton, IBM, MasterCard. During the 5 weeks in Singapore, we're visiting over 20 companies. In the summertime, we have a 2-month consulting project in a foreign country. So in the case of ESSEC, which is obviously the school I can talk about the most, there's a lot of global exposure. You're spending time on up to 5 continents if you choose to organize yourself that way. It's highly flexible and adaptable to your personal case. We keep the program very small. So we take about 30 to 40 people each year, and that allows us to really give a lot of individual attention. The classes can be personalized and adapted to the interests and the needs of the people in the program. Everyone knows each other really well. It's almost like a family. People form very close relationships. It's the opposite of the large programs that you hear about that have anywhere from 2, 3, or even 500 people in the program. It's totally not that. So I just shared with you the example of ESSEC. These are the kind of details that you can get from speaking with the admissions reps. So take the time to do that. Beyond that, go onto Facebook and Twitter and check out what everyone's saying about these schools. See if you can get in touch with alumni. You can search for alumni on the website, get their names, search for them on LinkedIn or even Facebook, and see what kind of additional information you can get by speaking to them. And if you know, it's also true that the alumni can be quite busy, so you cannot guarantee you're going to get a response just because you've reached out to them. They're not paid to answer your questions, whereas admissions reps are. So if they're working for the school, obviously they're going to be pretty diligent about getting in touch with you. So what could actually be a better option than just hunting down your own alumni to talk to is asking the admissions rep to put you in touch with an alum who he or she knows will be free. But again, that will depend on availability. So I hope that helps answering your question a little bit. Sergio asks, I started a company 5 years before earning my bachelor's degree. Can that be seen as compensation for the 3 to 4 years experience? This is a kind of special case. You started a company. Generally, the answer is going to be no. Just because you started a company, and worked for 5 years before your bachelor's degree does not, to the admissions board at least, necessarily guarantee that you have the appropriate professional maturity as somebody who's, let's say 28 or 32 years old. I mean, it's fantastic that you started that company, but and I'm sure you gained invaluable knowledge and wisdom from that. But there's still a question of, we want everyone to match and to fit into the program together. That is not to say that we want everyone to be the same. By no means. Diversity is one of our strongest values and strengths, actually. We have over 90% international students in the ESSEC Global MBA. This year, remarkably, we have 55% women, which I've never heard of before. Last year I thought was high when we had 40% women, but 55 blows it out of the water. I've never heard of that in an MBA program. So we're not looking for everyone to have the same experiences. But when you think about what somebody who is 35 years old with 10 plus years experience has to contribute and offer to the conversation of the MBA program, whereas somebody who's 25, it's going to be vastly different. And that 35-year-old may feel like he or she is constantly giving and sharing, whereas he's not gaining much from the other people if they were that young. So it's to keep it fair, to keep it balanced, to make sure everyone will blend in. So that's why we cut it off at the 3 to 4 years. If you feel, however, Sergio, that your experience, and I don't know how many years ago you graduated. You said it. You graduated in 2014. I am almost certain that they'll tell you you're too young. Maybe next year though. But again, if you feel strongly that you would qualify anyway, you're welcome to apply. Anyone is welcome to apply. But generally speaking, that would be a no, because it's about post-graduation experience. All right, I'm going to move on. That was long, sorry. Next from Dalel. Thank you for your time. You're welcome. Okay, so I feel like I answered this question already. How important is it to mention your beliefs on how that school will help you? Okay, so I think you're trying to ask. What I understand is that you're referencing what you know about the school in your essay, and that's something I said earlier. And I said yes, I think it's a good idea to, at some point here and there during your essays to say something that makes reference to the program or the school itself. It just demonstrates that you have done research, and that is only to your credit. So yes, I think you want to. One of the main points of the essays is to show that you are the right fit for the school, and the school is the right fit for you. It's about matching. So demonstrating that through your own words and your own vision, I think, is exactly what you should be doing. All right, I'm going to move on. So Biswadeep asks another very specific question that's going to vary from school to school. You have to ask each school, buddy. If you want to know about ESSEC, this is not really about ESSEC today. This is more about general tips for essays for any school. But I will tell you, as far as ESSEC goes, the process is you start your application online, you put in all your information, you upload all the documents, that is to say your GMAT scores or GRE if you took that instead. If you're not a native English speaker or did not do your studies in English, let's say, you have to take the TOEFL or the IELTS. That would be uploaded as well. You have to upload a picture of yourself, your ID, your transcripts, your CV, and then you have to get letters of reference sent in. There's a template on the website. On the application page on the bottom left, it says download template. That template you should send to the 3 people who are going to be writing your references. So it's just a form they fill out, print it, sign it, scan it, send it back to us directly. It's easy. Everything's done online. And the essays are part of the application, as you know. You, of course, proofread them, have them made perfect, and then you submit, and everything is sent in. And at that point, you wait. Your file will be received and reviewed, and they'll read your essays and evaluate all your documents, etc., and will determine if you're being shortlisted for an interview. Assuming that you're being shortlisted, you'll be contacted for having an interview, which is usually conducted by Skype. We usually have at least 2, maybe 3 people on our end. Of course, it's only you on your end, and the interviews last roughly a half an hour. And pretty shortly after, you have an admissions decision. Usually 24 to 48 hours later, you have admissions decision. And by the way, some of the scholarships, what we call in-house scholarships, are awarded automatically. So there's no extra application for them. You just apply for the program, and if you qualify for these in-house scholarships, which are all on the website, you're told at the same time that, hey, by the way, you also qualify for the following scholarships. So you should check those out. They're quite generous. So there's a question from Nimesh. How difficult is it to find employment if one does not understand the French language? Very. Imagine I was a French guy who went to India and only spoke French. Would I find a job? There's your answer. So, I mean, a lot of people have the idea that, okay, especially in finance or banking, it's quite international. And sure, if it's a French bank, they're dealing with the banks in Italy and Germany and England, etc., and they're usually using English as the common language. But all the internal operations are in the local language. So if you're going to work in Italy, you need to speak Italian. If you're going to work in Germany, you need to speak German. Period. I mean, there are some exceptions. Some companies have more English-speaking environments, but you should anticipate needing to know the local language wherever country you end up working in. That's just general advice. So Mutahar Hossein asks about a master's in finance. Yes, we have a top-rated master's in finance program. It was number 2 in the world till this year. I think it's number 4. I'm not really sure. It's an advanced master's in financial techniques. Just go to the website, the ESSEC.com website, and the first thing you'll see is programs, and you can find it there. ESSEC.com. Buzodip. Third question. Can activities and accolades received in schools mentioned in extracurricular activities for postgraduate applicants in MBA? Okay. Bizodip, I know your sentences and your essays are going to be better than the ones here, but we'll try to deal with it anyway. Can activities and accolades received in schools mentioned? Be mentioned. You need a verb, buddy. Okay. So, yeah, why not? Sure. I mean, people do that all the time, and even on their CVs, sometimes people include an awards and accolades section if there is something appropriate to mention. But again, what is the global picture of your CV looking like? If it's turning into more than 2 pages, no. And again, 1 is best. So really, there's no. If you want my honest opinion, there is no reason why anyone here today cannot have a 1-page CV. It's just unnecessary to put more. You got to cut to the chase, and that's part of business. Part of being a manager is understanding how to look at what's important, because you don't have infinite amount of time, you don't have infinite resources or money or staff. So it just shows that you understand how to get to the point and show what's most important. That's what it comes down to with the CV. But yes, in your essays, it's another place that people sometimes mention extracurricular activities, accolades, and other awards. So sure. So there's 2 minutes left to this presentation. Does anybody else have any more questions?
Eric, if you don't mind, I wouldn't mind throwing a question in, just with in mind that a lot of our users on Beat the GMAT aren't English native speakers, and you definitely touched upon this in your slides in terms of making sure that your essays are well crafted, well written. How buttoned up grammar-wise, sentence structure, and such do these essays really need to be? Like, is that a make or break type of issue for someone who's maybe not an English native speaker, who maybe they struggle a little bit with perfect sentence structure? How much does that potentially hold you back?
I mean, the Queen of England doesn't put the fear of death in me, but this picture's pretty scary.
She is scary.
I think it's absolutely essential to have perfect English in your essays. Yes, I mean, of course we do understand that you're coming from foreign countries, but we also pretty much anticipate that people are on the side getting help from whoever. So take that into consideration. I mean, you need to be able to express yourself properly and clearly. And okay, if there's a small mistake here and there, it's no one's gonna freak out. It won't like automatically remove you from the running. But I think it shows the effort and the care and the attention to detail that you have submitted your essays with perfect grammar, spelling, and punctuation. For me, this is just basic. And maybe it's easier for me to say as a native English speaker, but if I weren't, I would damn well be sure to have somebody that I trust to check that for me. And more than one person, by the way. Hope that answers the question.
Yeah, thank you.
Any other questions? I'm going to pop out the question box again. Are the recommendation letters to be written by teachers of both colleges and schools? So again, Biswadeep, I assume you're talking about ESSEC because this is the only school I can answer this for. And I mean, the best option for reference letters is to have your employer. Your direct current employer is the first choice. But I know that for some people that's not possible because they haven't told their employer yet that they're going to do an MBA, and by default quitting their job. So unless their company is sponsoring them. So it may not be okay for you to have your current direct supervisor. If there's anyone else at the company that you can have write for you, a former supervisor, even colleagues at your previous job perhaps, theoretically you'd be more connected to your current and previous jobs than your previous professors because you should have a number of years experience already. However, if there's a certain professor that you particularly connected with, that knows you very well, that understands you as a professional, by all means, I think one of your 3 reference letters could come from a former teacher. I wouldn't have more than one from a teacher though, because it's really much more about the career. Also, people who are self-employed, they don't have a boss, so that's tough. So what do? So people who they have regular business dealings with, maybe B2B or a client that they've known for a while, anyone that knows you in a professional capacity is able to write the references. And the references are not that long. It's a form they fill out, some comments at the bottom, and that's it. It's not too daunting a task. So Nimesh asks, how much GMAT score should one be comfortable with to apply? Well, again, that's going to vary from school to school, so I'm going to assume you're asking about ESSEC. I can tell you that our current students have a combined average of 640. So that should give you a guideline of the range of score you should have at least to apply. Again, for me, the GMAT is not the most important thing. The most important thing is the interview. I said this in the very beginning. It shows, who you really are, how you express yourself, how articulate you are, how confident you are. Because again, an MBA is all about the job afterwards. If you bomb in an interview with us, you're probably going to bomb in an interview after us. In other words, trying to get a job after with having completed your MBA, which doesn't help anyone. So interview is super, super important. But to get interviewed, you got to get shortlisted. How do you get shortlisted? With great essays. That's why I'm here today. That's why you're here today. So the GMAT contributes to it. In the case of ESSEC, also GMAT becomes important at least a little bit for scholarships. So the higher your score, the more likely you are to get a scholarship. I know that in certain countries, there tends to be a more competitive culture. I'll use the example of India, for example. I know Indians tend to be very strong with the GMAT, or at least fight to have a strong score. So considering where you're from, that may play into it. And I mention this because, for example, one of our scholarships is the diversity scholarship. Obviously, that's related to your diversity, where you're from. So in a given year, if let's say you're, I don't know, German, and if in a given year 50 Germans have already applied with pretty great GMAT scores, well, if you're the 51st German to apply and you don't have a great score, you're probably not going to get a diversity scholarship. Make sense? So I hope that helps. You asked the second question, how an MBA differs from a master's in management. Well, the main thing, the fundamental difference between a MIM, so master's in management and an MBA, is a MIM is for people with 0 or max 1 year experience, and an MBA is for people with a minimum 3 or 4 years experience. So it's clear. It's a question of experience and professional maturity. Beyond that, a MIM is longer. Usually it's like 2 to 3 years. It includes some kind of apprenticeships. Or internships, whereas because these are for younger people with 0 experience, whereas MBA's internship is again for younger people. So we go for more of consulting projects in a team format where you're operating like a consulting company, working with an external company. Can other entrepreneurial activities be done like network marketing to earn side income along with the MBA in the business school? I think what you'll find is MBA programs are quite intense and you won't have any time to engage in other employment or other job, entrepreneurial network activities. You, at least in the case of ESSEC, in this, I'll tell you about the fall term. So the first term, you have 6 classes. So you're roughly, it's 4 days a week from 9 to 12, and then from 1:30 to 4:30. Fridays are usually career days, so there's either presentations or visits to companies, which could include a bit of travel. There's workshops and improving your CV, your interview skills, your elevator pitch. There's a whole bunch going on, and then you have group projects. And in a given term, you could have up to 2 or 3 groups at the same time to deal with, and managing everyone's schedules in that group. It can be intense. So to plan on working during a full-time MBA is pretty difficult. And I think you should really, if you can, try to give 100% of your attention and energy on doing the MBA to really do it well. I mean, it's not very often, and probably ever again in your working life, that you'll have a year off or 2 years off from not working at a job to focus on developing yourself and improving yourself. Take the opportunity. It won't happen again normally. So I would really focus on yourself. Okay, Dan?
Yeah, I think that's about all the time we have. Did you have any closing thoughts, Eric, or are you wrapped up?
Yeah, I'd just like to say thank you very much for all of you who joined. We had a lot of you out there today, and I think the conversation was pretty broad. It was a little bit all over the place, so I hope it was clear. I hope I didn't talk too fast, as I know I tend to do as a New Yorker, and now a Parisian living here for 4 years. But again, you have my email on the screen. I'll fast forward get rid of that queen. Let's put the email back on the screen, so you can reach out anytime if you have additional questions. If you'd like to have a chat on the phone to talk about some of the specifics about ESSEC, what's life like on campus, scholarship opportunities, residence. We have 4 residence buildings here. There's a very active student life and association life here, sports teams. There's a full gym on campus. Or some people choose to live in Paris, in the city, like I do. I commute, takes about 45 minutes or so every day, so it's totally possible. About the program itself, where people go, jobs afterwards. So anyway, I'm here for all that. And if you are applying to ESSEC, I'm here to also serve as a sort of coach, as I've done today with this presentation. even on an individual basis, to ensure that you're able to submit the best application as possible, and that includes the essays. So what I've done for people, if you want, once you've finished your essay and you've polished it 100% perfect and you're about to submit it, I invite you to send it to me first to have a final look at it and give you some final pointers before you submit it officially. So that's something that I'm willing to do as well. So that being said, thanks again, and I look forward to hearing from you and receiving your application.
Thanks, Eric, and thanks everybody for your questions. Have a great day.